Hey, police, Trooper Fry.
There's somebody after me.
Where are you?
There's somebody after me.
Okay, where are you?
I don't know. There's somebody after me. Why?
I want to show you this. Please come on. Please.
No, stop it, please. Stop it, please. Please stop it. Please stop it. No, please stop it, please.
Now, if that call that you just heard was not disturbing enough, it would prove to be a call that left so many more questions rather than answers. 23-year-old Shannan Gilbert was on the phone to the police for over 20 minutes while suffering what seemed to be a terrifying ordeal. But once the call had disconnected, the case went cold, and Shannan Gilbert would never be heard or seen again. However, Shannan's disappearance would spring police into action when they searched the Gilgo Beach area of New York, and what they found was so much more disturbing than you could imagine, as it soon turned out that Shannan's disappearance would end up serving as just the tip of the iceberg. An iceberg that would uncover a serial killer active for over 20 years, living a normal life and hiding in plain sight. So in today's podcast, we are going to delve deep and unwrap the ongoing case of the Gilgo Beach serial killer.
That call was incredibly distressing. It's something actually that, having had to listen to that a few times, is something that definitely stuck in my memory. And it was one of those things that you had told me this was one of the key elements of the case. When we were hearing that phone call, as we are going to learn, it blew the whole case open. You know, this is the start of a series of events that we're obviously going to go through in this podcast. It's seriously concerning, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And do you know what the funny thing about this case? As we unwrap it, we're going to find out and learn so much more. But I have had, you know what I'm like, man, I've got an obsession with all things true crime, and but I've had a slight obsession with this case since long before who is now deemed the prime suspect in the case was ever even known about. And obviously that call had been released, and we had known about what had gone on in the case for probably years prior to the latest sort of revolutions in the case. But I think the best thing that we can do here is, why don't you tell me a bit about the woman on the end of that call in Shannan Gilbert?
It's May 2010, isn't it, when that phone call is placed. Shannan is an inspiring actress, but also she was doing sex work on the side. She used this website called Craigslist, which you might be aware of. Big thing, mainly in America, if we're being honest with you. I don't think I've ever used it in the UK, have you?
No comment.
But yeah, basically Craigslist is that one of those things that you can do anything on. But what unfortunately was happening here was that she was using it to find a client for the evening to spend the night with.
It's a website where a lot of crime can go through as well. Like, you can sell weapons, you can sell yourself, you know. There's a dark side to Craigslist is what I'd say.
Yes, and on that dark side of Craigslist, she was propositioned by a man who had said that she would get a better rate than she would do otherwise. And this is where I suppose this starts to get interesting, right? She had to travel a considerable amount of time from where she was based, which was in Manhattan in New York. She had to go and drive an hour out into the sticks towards Long Island. Now, for anyone that's in the UK watching, Long Island is that sort of, I suppose, a sort of an area that juts out away from Manhattan and the Bronx and all of these parts of New York that we know and are aware of. And it's sort of like a beachy area right on the sea on the Atlantic coast. She was asked to attend a location which was an upmarket area of Long Island. It's a gated community. It's called Oak Beach.
I've heard of Oak Beach somewhere.
Why? Why have you heard of it?
Oak Beach, isn't it, is the word synonymous
Go on.
with like rich and famous people basically using that gated community for alleged sort of sex parties and stuff like that?
I'm glad you brought these rooms up because there are a considerable amount of rooms. Now, we have to say, we don't obviously know this to be a fact, but those rumours I've heard as well. So I've heard that this gated community is one of those places you have to be rich to live there. It's a very well-off part of the world. And also there's some weird things about the town planning of this. And you might be thinking, why am I talking about town planning right now? Well, basically, the guy that designed this place didn't want any poor people being anywhere near it. So he built the bridges too low for any buses to come in. And he designed this area basically all around the rich and the famous almost, right?
Okay.
To be fair, in her line of work, that's actually a good good night of work. Do you know what I mean? Like getting a lot of money,
Of course, yeah.
going out to this place. You know, you don't know what you're going to go into, but also it's a load of money. And as I say, I've heard it was up to about 4 times her usual rate. To go that kind of distance, it's unusual for her. So what she did, she hired a driver for the evening. This guy called Michael Pack, who was driving around in a black SUV, and he was there to basically get her to the location, but also to look after her and make sure that nothing happened to her, right? So she was obviously getting paid enough money to be able to look after herself, but also pay for this guy.
Yeah. So once she's got to the property in Oak Beach, apparently she goes in, she's in the house for an hour or so or whatever. The guy that she's actually gone to meet says that there's no sexual activity, they're just talking and whatnot. But the next time we hear from Shannan Gilbert is that police phone call. And to be honest, it's like when you hear that sort of distress and unsettlement firsthand, it really does hit home, doesn't it?
It does.
Hey, police, Trooper Fry.
There's somebody after me.
Where are you?
There's somebody after me.
Okay, where are you?
I don't know. There's somebody after me. Why?
I want to show you this. Please come on. Please.
No, stop it, please. Stop it, please. Please stop it. Please stop it. No, please stop it, please.
What also really concerned me about this, though, is there were 2 guys in the background. And for me, I did think they were suspects when I first heard the call, didn't I? Do you know who the 2 guys were?
So one of them was the guy that had hired her for sex, and one of them was the driver. And actually, upon listening to it back, it doesn't it more sounds like the two guys are trying to get her away from the property. Like,
yeah, 100%. So basically, the client is called Joseph Brewer. Yeah. And what you hear him say at the early stages of that call is like, basically, just please leave.
Yeah.
And there's obviously, we'll get into the mental state of Shannan at this time later on, but there's obviously something strange going on here. Like, we don't know whether it's drugs, we don't know if she's going through a bit of an episode, but
or something has potentially happened in that house that has put her into that sort of frenzy.
Exactly, right? But again, if he's saying please leave, like, do you know what I mean? Like, if something was going down and he was involved in it, it would be a very different conversation, wouldn't it?
There you go. And not only does she leave, she ends up running down the road. She is screaming. She's knocking on doors. She's actually doing all of this while on the phone to the police and stating there's someone after me. They're trying to get me and whatnot. I think she unsuccessfully knocks on quite a few doors. One guy, she knocks on his door and doesn't he let her in?
Yeah, well, he doesn't let her in, but he sees her for sure. It's a guy called Gus Coletti. And you actually hear that on the phone call itself. You actually hear with Shannan talking with Gus, and he obviously sees her.
Yeah, he actually phones the police while she's on the phone to the police.
Yeah, so he later on at I think it was about 5:20 a.m. Now the first call happened I think at about 4:50 a.m. He calls the police and says, yeah, I've seen this girl. She's in my front yard. She's a 14-year-old girl, and she looks like someone's chasing her, right? She looks incredibly frightened. She's screaming. She looks like someone's chasing her. And now what is also interesting is that Gus said there was someone chasing her, and it was an Asian man that was with her. Now, that Asian man in a black SUV probably was Michael Pack, who is the guy that was driving her, right? But she ends up hiding underneath Gus's boat out in the front yard. So again, it shows you how wealthy the area is. But she's there cowering, hiding, while she's still on the phone with the police. And there's something about it, mate, as you say, something must have gone on in that house. She keeps saying to the police operator, where are you? And she says, I'm in a house, I don't know where I am. So she's disorientated, she's fleeing the scene now, she's running down the road. But as you say, and as you've heard, she's screaming. There's something incredibly wrong that's been happening.
And when the phone call ended and it was cut off from the police, that was the last that anyone ever heard or saw of Shannan. Obviously, police did respond. They did go to the scene, but to no prevail. They found no one. They found nothing. They found no evidence. And the case pretty much went cold after that, didn't it?
It did. And it went cold for a very long time. Shannon's family are absolutely distraught. They know that she's missing at this point. And I think what is a very key part of this story is that Michael Pack actually went with her brother the next day to try and find Shannan, and they were unsuccessful to do so. So for me, the immediate suspects that I'm thinking of are Brewer in this case, who was later cleared, and also Michael Pack, because again,
Of course.
why is he chasing her around? Like, he's obviously trying to protect her, but she obviously didn't get in the car with him, so it seems weird. But then why would he then go and get her brother to try and help find her the next day?
Well, this
Doesn't
is
make
where
sense.
it comes into it. It's worth noting that Shannan was known to have drug abuse problems. She was also known to have bad mental health, and not just mental health in terms of depression and whatnot, but psychotic episodes and stuff like that. And therefore, maybe there could have been some sort of frenzy whipped up in her mind that wasn't actually there, and there wasn't necessarily a threat there. And that could be backed up a little bit by the fact that Michael Pack was so cooperative in terms of reaching out to the family, trying to help and do what he could.
Yeah, and what I think is a very bad trope that we shouldn't necessarily go too far into is immediately presuming that because she was addicted to drugs and because she had mental health issues, that's the only side of this story that we should consider. It does seem like in the call, mate, there was more foul play that was going on, right? And so for me, that's where this case becomes very interesting, because, as we said at the start, this is the start of a domino chain of events that happened. And the next domino that falls is in December of 2010. There's an off-duty police officer who I would say was loosely involved in the search, but definitely wanted to try and help. And so what he did is he took his cadaver dog out. He had this lovely Alsatian that he took out, and he went down to Gilgo Beach, which is 10 miles away from Oak Beach, right? It's not far away.
It was about 10 minutes
10
away.
minutes, sorry.
Just for anyone that doesn't know, a cadaver dog is a dog that police use to obviously sniff out corpses, dead bodies, things like that.
Yeah, exactly. And he's going down this road, which is now famous in the case, which is called Ocean Parkway. This road, and we'll show some video and some imagery of it as we're doing this, it's a 3-lane highway right next to the beach, but alongside it there is bush, there is shrubs. In the winter and in the dark, it's a very, very dangerous place to be if you're out there by yourself, right? It's definitely not somewhere you go for a Sunday stroll on the beach. There's some dense area around it. And that's important because this off-duty police officer with his dog Blue finds something there, which again just blows this case wide open.
And with obviously the disappearance of Shannan known to be in that area, I think that at that point the police are, you never know until you've identified a body, but the police are thinking, we found Shannan, haven't we?
Yeah, and to be fair, with the amount of publicity around this case, that would have been it would have been a good outcome to finally find her. We're talking about months of searching. Now, police ineptitude is a theme of this case, which we'll certainly discuss. But the police hadn't done anything so far to be able to find her. And really, while it's a large area, you would have hoped that she'd be found sooner than 6 months. Do you know what I mean? It's not good. But they didn't actually find Shannan. The body that they found was, in fact, a Melissa Burthorn.
Now, this is why I told you that you needed to research this case, because not only did they find Melissa, they found Maureen Barnes, Megan Waterman, and Amber Costello. All 4 of the women were found wrapped in burlap, which is a material most commonly used for hunting. It's what you wrap animals and stuff in when you're hunting. All bound with duct tape, and all were buried almost perfectly 500 feet apart from each other along that same stretch of Gilgo Beach, and all 4 of them were sex workers.
They were. There was also a lot of other similarities, Joe, that we have to discuss. So the first similarity is that they all used Craigslist or Backpage to solicit their clients, and that was the same as Shannan did in her sort of a disappearance as well. They were all small, very small, in fact. So do you remember Gus on the phone call said that he thought he saw a teenager, a 14-year-old girl?
Yeah.
You can understand why he said that, because they were all basically 5 foot and under, or very close to being 5 foot. Tiny women, and they also all only weighed about 45 kilos. So again, we're talking about very petite, young looking girls.
Well, mate, there's more to come, because they all either had green or hazel coloured eyes. The period of time in which these girls vanished, it was all over a 2-year period. So if that is not enough of a pattern to tell you that we had a serial killer on our hands, then I really don't know what is.
Yeah, there was a serial killer using the summer months of each of the years in which they were discovered. So Maureen was in 2007, Melissa was in 2009, Megan and Amber were both in 2010, but they were all around the sort of the summer months, right? So there was this guy going out there, serial killer, using that period of time to find and kill these women. So because of all these similarities that we've said, because of the burlap, etc., right, they were classed together and they were given a name. The name was the Gilgo Four, and that was synonymous with all the news, everything, all the coverage at the moment at the time was saying they were called the Gilgo Four.
And the ironic thing is, the Gilgo Four didn't actually include Shannan Gilbert. She's still not been found at this time. So her disappearance has led to the discovery of these 4 bodies, yet she's still missing and, to be honest, by this point, presumed dead.
So Melissa was the second girl to go missing out of the Gilgo Four. She went missing in 2009. It was July 12th, actually, that she actually did go missing. And she'd been living in the Bronx area of New York City. And she met a guy on Craigslist. She deposited $900 into her bank account. And then she was never seen again. The fucked up part of this, though, is that strange things started to happen around this disappearance. Melissa had a 15-year-old sister, right? And she was getting some phone calls, the sister was, from a random bloke that was saying some really dark shit.
Yeah, I mean, if your sister is missing and all of a sudden you start getting these phone calls, you're maybe even going to be filled with a little bit of optimism. You might find something out about the disappearance. But this guy's actually tormenting the sister. He's saying to her, are you a whore like your sister? And telling her about things that he's done to her sister, and even stating that he had killed her sister, wasn't he?
Yeah, it was. Yeah. And do you know what? She wasn't the only person that was getting these calls, by the way, because Maureen's family were also getting calls. She was the first person to go missing out of the Gilgo Four, and she was a mother of 2. She had to work as a sex worker on top of her day job to basically pay for the mortgage of her home. So it's proper dark, this one. When she went missing, rather than her sister, it was a friend of hers, Sarah, that was getting calls from a random number. And again, it's just as dark. They were saying that Maureen was still alive and that she was in a whorehouse in Queens. It's sick, isn't it, mate?
Yeah, and obviously he never identified himself, but he said he was going to call back. He never did. That then went cold. And let's now move on to Amber Costello, because this is probably the key victim when it comes to how police were actually able to eventually find the man they believed was behind this. Now, Amber Costello had a housemate that she lived with, and he obviously knew what her trade was, what she was up to and whatnot. And he remembers her basically not complaining, but speaking about quite a creepy customer she had, a customer that was very insistent, would be ringing her multiple times a day and stuff like that. And also, once again, was offering something like 4 times the going rate for her services. And this housemate of Amber Costello actually mentions the fact that he actually saw the man that she left with. And his exact words he described him as were an ogre-looking man who drove a
Chevrolet Avalanche car. Important one to remember, but this guy was a huge bloke. As you say, big, tall, wide. That's the only really the way you can describe like an ogre of a man, right? But it's a very distinctive look to Buzz. You don't really forget someone that looks like that, do you?
Yeah, and not only that, that's actually quite a distinctive car. It was quite a rare one that he was driving at that moment in time. So that ended up being a real key key bit of information for the police.
In total, I counted it, and you tell me if you think otherwise, but I counted it about 20 victims.
20 bodies.
That were found in that sort of like Gilgo Beach, Long Island area over quite a lot of time. It wasn't like it was all, they found them in like a couple of weeks. It was like over years of time they found all of these bodies. And there were some that were very distinct and very grouped, and there were others that didn't quite make sense for like a pattern.
Yeah, like obviously there were more sex workers found, but there were also male bodies found. There were sort of young people found as well. And what I would say is New York is a very, very big place, and people go missing all the time, people get murdered all the time, abducted all the time and stuff like that. And this sort of stretch of beach would be kind of an ideal place to dump a body. So, as shocking as it is to hear that number, I believe that there are multiple places that you could search around, you know, maybe the New York area or different places in America. And if you found one body there and then decided to really go in and start searching that area, I think you probably would find more.
Yeah.
So it wasn't as alarming to me as it sounds to have found all these bodies, because the other thing is they could tell from the rate of decomposing and whatnot, these had stretched out over a long time, hadn't they?
Yeah, they had. And do you know what was really important for me is the patterns, right? Because you know what serial killers like. Do you know the show that I love, mate, is Mindhunter? Have you ever watched that show?
No.
Do you know? It was all about basically the FBI trying to profile serial killers in this kind of like time period and before. And what they always say on that show is that there were patterns. If you were a serial killer, you had a way in which you enacted the killings. You had rituals, you had procedures that you did, and you kind of had like fascinations with certain people, right? So the Gilgo Four, they all had a lot of commonalities. They were all in burlap. Do you know what I mean? The stuff that we've discussed.
They were all found off Craigslist. They were all,
and also they were all singular bodies. That they weren't dismembered. They weren't, you know, separated. But there were other bodies that we have to say that were dismembered. There were like torsos that were found in separate parts of Long Island, right? But then other body parts found on Gilgo Beach, like arms and, you know, and feet and skulls were found on there, right? So the thing that we will discuss later on is, do we think that this was a singular person involved in all 20 of these cases, or really was it a series of people, right? But ultimately, the next thing we've got to say is there was an arrest after this case involving the Gilgo Four.
Yep, there was an arrest of a male carpenter called John Bittrollf. He was arrested in 2014 and was suspected of multiple murders. Why don't you tell me a little bit about John Bittrollf?
Yeah, the story of how he was caught is interesting in itself. Basically, he was caught because his brother was arrested. They had to sample his brother's DNA somehow. And they then used that because, you know, brothers are like similar in terms of their DNA. They then could link that DNA to the murders of two women, which is the women they actually got arrested for. They were called Rita Tangredi and Colleen McNamee. So those were the two cases that he got arrested for. But, mate, the story of this guy is pretty weird. As you say, family man. It wasn't someone that you would necessarily suspect of being involved in this. But also his pattern was slightly different. What he did with these victims is he did dismember them. And again, he would wrap them in plastic and put them in different parts. He would put different parts of them in different parts of the county. So it's a very different MO to this killer of the Gilgo Four that we've been talking about, because he kept them intact, kept them in the burlap. Do you see what I mean?
The problem for me with John Bittrollf and having him as the main suspect, even though I actually believe that there's probably multiple murderers in this area, is the police were still finding bodies while this guy was in jail, while this guy was detained. So he couldn't have been the one at the time that was doing these murders. And the bodies that they were finding were more in the same fashion as the Gilgo Beach ones in terms of how they were wrapped in the burlap and in the positions that they were found in. So that means that despite catching one killer, the police still needed to find at least one more. And this is where we meet Rex Heuermann.
Rex Heuermann, I'm an architect, I'm an architectural consultant, I'm a troubleshooter, born and raised on Long Island.
Okay.
Been working in Manhattan since 1987.
And you know what? I think with the context of what we know about this case now you can go through with a fine-tooth comb and you can look at that interview that we've just seen there and you can think, yeah, he does give off a weird vibe and things like that. But at the same time, Rex Heuermann, if guilty, was very much a man that was hiding in plain sight. He had a family, he had a wife that he lived with, he had a daughter, and he had a stepson as well. They lived in an area called Massapequa Park, which was in New York, but obviously he commuted and worked in Manhattan as an architect. And funny enough, a little bit of trivia on him, he was in the same school class growing up as Billy Baldwin, one of the famous Baldwin brothers. Do you know the Baldwin brothers?
Yeah, that was weird. That isn't the one that shot someone, is it? Is that
No,
the other one?
I think that was Alec Baldwin.
Alec
That was the
Baldwin.
same one that was in that great episode of Friends, you know.
Yeah.
He was in there, yeah.
It would be funny if he did, if it was the same one, by the way, that they were connected.
Yeah,
you
it
know,
would be
school
mad.
classmates.
But what I would say is I've seen a couple of interviews from people that went to school with Rex, and they said that even though he was massive, he was easily the biggest kid in the class, not even that, the biggest kid in the year, he was bullied, and although because of his frame he could have fought back, he didn't fight back, and he had quite a hard time at school. His work employees that would speak after the arrest of Rex Heuermann noted that he was quite strange. He would often sneak up on them in the workplace. He would tell them how good he was at tracking. He would speak to them about hunting, which he was actually an avid hunter. And that's very key when we speak about the fact that these bodies were wrapped in burlap. And not only that, one distinct thing that multiple sources since his arrest have brought up is the fact that Rex Heuermann took a keen interest and at any given opportunity actually would bring up the Gilgo Beach murders. Now, I understand that it was an ongoing murder, serial killer case and whatnot, but I have just told you guys the size of New York. New York, for the British viewers here, has twice the population of Scotland, per se, which is its own country. Do you know what I mean? So there are always multiple murderers, multiple actual serial killers active at any one time. So for this guy to be constantly bringing up that case to multiple people is a little bit scary. And there was one worker that he employed that spoke about the fact that she was very creeped out by an interaction she had when actually not even with Rex Heuermann.
It was her 40th birthday, and she had booked a cruise vacation.
Where are you going? I said, I'm gonna be in the middle of the ocean. You're not gonna find me in the middle of the ocean. He said, oh, yes, I can.
Muriel didn't think much of the comment until the second day of her trip.
There was a white envelope under my door. It was a note from him. The note said, I told you I could find you anywhere.
Now, I spoke about the fact that he had a family, and obviously having a family would make it very, very difficult to be able to be carrying out these sort of crimes. However, his wife was originally born in Iceland, and each and every summer, religiously, she would take the kids back to Iceland and they would visit family and whatnot. But obviously Rex Heuermann's a very busy man. He's got architecture, he's got a business to run, he needs to commute into Manhattan, he needs to allegedly kill sex workers. No, I'm only joking, but either way, he wouldn't go on those trips. And a lot of people have speculated that that could be the time when he was left on his own, and therefore could be a time when he would strike if he is guilty of this case.
So the fact that some people thought he was creepy and the fact that he took an interest in the case, it wouldn't really be used in a court of law. I don't really think you could convict him based on that, really. So is there anything else? Is there any other evidence out there?
Yep, there's a lot. So, obviously, we spoke about the fact that these women had been receiving calls, right? And they're able to track down the calls, and they're able to do it by sort of cell towers, and then they're able to determine within a couple of blocks, basically. They call it the square, and it's within a couple of blocks. It's a short sort of area, small area that they're able to. Now, most of those calls, if not all of those calls, came from two specific locations. One of those locations was in Manhattan, in a small area very, very close to Rex Heuermann's workplace, and the other location was in Massapequa Park, where Rex Heuermann lived.
Okay. There's a bit more than a coincidence then.
Yep.
Right. Okay. Right.
Not only
Anything
that,
else?
those calls were off burner phones. Burner phones, for people that don't know, are basically phones that you can buy and they're untraceable. A lot of drug dealers will use them and stuff like that. Rex Heuermann has been caught on CCTV buying burner phones as well. And not only that, he's also on dating apps. So some of the women had apparently been contacted through dating apps as well as Craigslist. Now, no matter what, whether he's a murderer or not, you shouldn't really be on dating apps when you've got a wife and 2 kids at home, should you?
No, but do you know what? Sometimes you could just leave it there by accident. You created a profile a few years ago and you've forgotten to delete it. It just makes complete sense, doesn't it?
They were up-to-date selfies.
Oh, okay.
these ones you're seeing on screen now, and listen, he might have been a bad guy, but he's slaying in these selfies.
I don't want to
isn't he, Rex
critique.
Heuermann?
Let's not do any sort of love advice for him here. To be honest with you, mate, I'm questioning them slightly.
You
He's
can't
dressed
go,
up.
I think you can't go wrong with a mirror pick, mate. I think he's looking good. I'm not surprised he was able to entice a few.
What I really liked about him, there was one which was sort of like a downwards angle where I thought, do you know what? He has put a bit of effort into that. Fair enough.
Yeah. One thing that he did do through being on these dating apps is he actually met up with another sex worker, but he took her out for dinner. And during the dinner, he once again, like he always seems to, manages to bring up the Gilgo Beach murders.
Now a hairdresser, Nikki claims she may be one that got away.
I had never gone anywhere and felt fear. My gut was telling me I needed to get away, and I've never had that before. He wanted to really get into it. He asked me how I thought they could get rid of the bodies without being caught in that area. And I said, I've never been over there. I've never even seen Gilgo Beach. And his response was, well, it's really dark and desolate.
So that in itself, in my opinion, proves a lot. But I get it. You can still say, well, in a court of law, maybe that might not stand up. I told you we'd come back to Costello's roommate, didn't I? And how did Costello describe the man that she left with that night?
An ogre.
An ogre. So right now on screen, you can see a picture of Rex Heuermann and a picture of John Bittrollf, the man who was actually assumed to be the murderer of the Gilgo Four until the discovery of Rex Heuermann. I'm just going to ask you frankly here, Josh, out of the two of them, who would you say looks more ogre-like to you?
Okay, yeah, fair enough. But that isn't clear evidence you can use in a court of law to say that this is the guy. You can't just say, oh yeah, he looks like an ogre, and so that must be the killer.
No, okay. But I'm just thinking about it now. Costello's roommate, he actually gave another key bit of information, didn't he?
Was it
now, John Bittrollf, to your memory, do you know what car he drove?
Do you know what? It could be for a Ferrari, for all I know. To be honest with you, I don't think it was.
Yeah.
I don't remember anything in any of the documents that I've seen, mate, talking about John Bittrollf's car.
Oh, okay. I'll just throw it out there then. Rex Heuermann drove a Chevy Avalanche. And as you can see on screen now, that Chevy Avalanche is literally parked outside the home of Rex Heuermann on this image that was taken as part of Google Maps.
Okay, right. So I think that's fair now. We can start, it is adding up, right? I'm sorry to ever have questioned you, mate.
But what they do need, the police, is cold hard evidence, don't they? They need some sort of DNA, they need a confession, they need something to really stick the nail in the coffin. And what better way, Josh, than pizza?
I mean, look, it solves every other problem I've ever had.
There you go. Fair. There you go. And Rex Heuermann was a pizza connoisseur of types.
He can't be more of a pizza connoisseur than I am.
No, honestly, but he was.
But did he go to fast food places around Manhattan, just chowing down on a slice? Can I tell you a funny story about a pizza that I had in New York once?
Go on.
I ordered a medium pizza when I was in New York. Do you know how many inches it was?
18.
It was 24 inches.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah. What's a large?
That is ridiculous. I don't know. But
Do you
whatever
think
it is, Rex Heuermann was eating large.
Yeah.
He could put away a large, easy. But Rex Heuermann had a problem, and it's a problem that I don't have. I personally like to eat the crust on a pizza, and Rex Heuermann did not like to eat the crust. So once the police started following him, as they do in many, many cases, they were waiting and really, really zoning in, trying to pounce on their moment when Rex Heuermann would discard a drink, a bit of food or something like that. And unfortunately for Rex Heuermann, this was something he did often. He would be eating on the go, and eventually he discards a box of pizza. That box of pizza is empty, but it does have a crust left in it. And that crust had DNA on it that matched the DNA found on the bodies of the Gilgo Four.
But it wasn't 100% accurate, is it? DNA, it never is 100%. It's never a clear slam dunk win that they've got him.
In my opinion, it's more accurate than it couldn't be, because it was a 99.7% accuracy to Rex Heuermann. Okay. Now, also, there was a hair found on one of the bodies, and that hair came back as a 99.7% accurate match to Rex Heuermann's wife.
How the hell did her hair get on a body?
If you sleep in bed with someone, if you share towels with someone...
Did they accuse her, though? Like...
No. She wasn't accused as being a suspect because she had an alibi for times of the murders. She was out of the house. But obviously, look, if you don't wash your bed sheets every day, if you don't wash your towels every day, if you use the same hairbrush as your wife, there are plenty of ways that a hair can get on there. So remember, not a 99.7% match for the both of them, individually 99.7% each, which... if you can do the maths, you can multiply it and you can realise that means it is beyond the realms of possibility, in my opinion, that this DNA did not come from Rex Heuermann.
Yeah, it's pretty much a slam dunk. Like, effectively, that purely was their case, really. If we're talking about evidence now, that's it.
And off the back of that, police then seize the opportunity. They arrest Rex Heuermann outside of his work in Manhattan. The Suffolk County Police Commissioner, Rodney Harrison, had this to say.
Rex Heuermann is a demon that walks among us, a predator that ruined families.
Just quickly, do you think that's a little bit weird? Because obviously in our sort of court and law system and whatever, you are innocent until proven guilty. And I get that all the evidence is now stacked up against Rex Heuermann. But in my book, until the judge bangs her hammer or his hammer, you are not guilty. And obviously he's calling Rex Heuermann a monster that walks among us and whatnot. Is that fair? Is that already sort of leaning the audience towards thinking that it's definitely Rex?
Well, you're going to tell us a bit more evidence about this case, about some of the stuff that was found in Rex Heuermann's possession, right? Which is seriously dark. So from the language perspective, I kind of understand it. But there's a legal element to this where he shouldn't be saying it publicly. But in America, the system, I suppose, is slightly different to the UK in that these figures are political. They have to win votes. They have to get elected. You know, it happens with the election system as if you're, going for a president. And so they do often sort of push this narrative. And it's weird. It doesn't make as much sense to us in the UK, but I think it's quite normal in the US.
And the funny thing is, like, a lot of these true crime cases that we've looked into, straight away, the guilty party will just admit their guilt as soon as they're arrested. But Rex Heuermann pleaded his innocence.
Rex Heuermann, I don't believe, is guilty. So certainly there are other people I believe are suspects.
Now you got Rex Heuermann sitting in a jail cell, and at the same time as this, the police decide to raid his house in Massapequa Park. And upon doing so, they take away a host of evidence. He had child on his computer, he had torture on his computer, he had over 300 firearms found in a basement of his house. Less than 150 of those are actually registered to Rex Heuermann's name. And not only that, his internet search history showed that for a 10-year period or so, he had been constantly searching the Gilgo Beach murders. He had been looking up family members and actually trying to track down their current whereabouts, the addresses of the members of the family of the women that he had been accused of killing. So to say that this man was obsessed with the case would be an absolute understatement, wouldn't it?
Did you hear that he was also looking up the police officers, like people connected to the actual case, and he was looking up their families as well? So yeah, like it wasn't. I mean, the level of obsession, the level of like seriousness that he looked at this case was way beyond like an average true crime fan that might watch something like this. Do you know what I mean? Like it was serious.
And when Rex was initially arrested, he was charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder and 3 counts of second-degree murder. But since then, he has also been charged with a 7th murder, meaning in total, Rex Heuermann is facing charges for the murders of Melissa Barthelemy, Megan Waterman, Amber Costello, Maureen Barnes, Jessica Taylor, Sandra Costello, and eventually Valerie Mack. Although there are a number of other possible victims that police believe Rex Heuermann could have murdered.
Do you think that this was all Heuermann's work? Like, we talked about 20 victims. Do you think it's just him?
No. No, I don't think it is. As I say, it's a long stretch of road. It's the perfect place to hide a body. There's always multiple murders happening, I should say. And no, I don't think that they are all the work of Rex Heuermann. I wouldn't be surprised if some of the murders that he's been charged with weren't him. I also wouldn't be surprised if some murders that haven't yet been charged to him were him. What I do believe is that I would say he's done at least 6, just in my guess.
So we've talked about the court case. We know that Rex is a very, very bad individual. What we haven't done is finalise the story of Shannan. So Shannan was eventually found in December of 2011, and that was over a year, wasn't it? She was went missing in 2010, and they eventually found her in 2011. The circumstances around her death are still unknown. She was found pretty badly decomposed, and I think the coroner said that she was drowned.
Yeah. There's a key thing here, though. Shannan wasn't found wrapped in burlap like the other Gilgo Four.
No, she was also, like, her clothes were strewn all over the place. She was, yeah, as I say, found drowned, and that doesn't fit the MO of these serial killers.
No. Quite a few people have suggested that there's just as much evidence that this was, you know, an accidental death without third-party involvement as there was to it being a murder.
How do you feel about that? Because for me, right, I'm going back to that call. I'm going back to her screaming, banging down doors. Obviously, drug abuse, mental health problems that she was dealing with could be a cause for that. But I don't know, mate. It just doesn't sit with. It doesn't. Sit
I mean,
with
there's
right.
just a lot of coincidental stuff that it's in an area that all these deaths are happening in and whatnot. If I had to put my money on it, and if you said, you know, did Rex Heuermann have any involvement in that death? I think I would maybe edge towards not. But
Which is crazy because, you know, this is what kicked it all off. This is what kicked the search off him.
Yeah.
And this is why these sort of weird circumstantial things ended up in him being convicted.
I would love to know what Shannan's family feel about this, whether they feel that Rex Heuermann was involved in that death. But either way, what we do know is Shannan was unfortunately the tip of the iceberg that did discover all of these deaths. Rex Heuermann at this current moment in time is still sat in prison. His next actual court hearing is around a week from now.
Yeah, it's coming up, isn't it? And we have to say it is a bit of an ongoing story. So all of the stuff that we've discussed here, it could change. Like, you know, Rex some of the convictions could be dispelled, could be released. But I do think, as you said, mate, there's enough evidence to get him with. And this is why I found this so interesting, because there is a date in 7 days' time, 5 days' time, that, you know, he could be sent down, he could be let off some of the charges. So maybe it's one we've got to revisit.
Yeah, we will do. But in the meantime, please let us know your thoughts on this case. Do you think there are multiple killers? Do you think that Rex Heuermann is the killer for all of the bodies that have been found over this period of time? And do you think he did it at all? There will be some people that maybe believe that he didn't do it. I think it's very, very hard, but obviously his lawyers and his solicitors and whatnot are claiming innocence, and he has currently pled not guilty. Please do us a massive favour and subscribe to the channel if you are liking the content. We're working really, really hard to get this all banged out for you guys. Make sure you like this video and hit the bell so that you get a notification every time one of our videos goes live. We will see you all in the next one.